Hi, I'm Matt Key, a software engineer living in London, and this is how I created a game engine in a week. Okay, to say I created the game engine in a week is a bit disingenuous. I'd actually been working on the game engine for about 6 months off and on as a side project, but a week ago I deleted almost all the code that I'd written. I kept a few things around, very minor things, but yeah, I just decided that the way I was developing it, I wasn't happy with, and I wanted to try and refocus my energy into actually delivering useful pieces of the engine instead of focusing on an overall architecture that might make my life easier in the future. Um, that process of trying to plan for the future actually was my downfall and made it so that I was spending more time developing the things to help me develop other things and never actually getting around to develop the thing that it helped me with in the first place. And I was stuck in a cycle. So yeah, I've done more in the last week than I had done in maybe 6 months. To be fair, in those 6 months, there was a lot of learning happening. I definitely used a lot of the knowledge that I learned in those 6 months in this last week. Um, but yeah, I have more to show from it for a week. So there's pluses and minuses for both approaches to development. But I'm going to show you what I've got. Okay, here we are in the editor. Um, Everything you see here, I've done in a week. Obviously, not the UI that I'm using is a library called ImGUI, which is a really great library. And for the rendering, I'm using a library called BGFX. So I have basic functionality. You can right click and create an entity in the scene hierarchy. When you click on the entity, then you can see the properties. You can add components. At the minute, it's just transform. These aren't connected to this bunny. This is just hard coded in. I actually don't have the keyboard working with the UI yet. It's not something that I got round to. But yeah, so I did mostly all this in a week. When I say a week, I do have a full-time job, so it's in the evenings, so around 2 to 3 hours in the evening. Some days I worked more, some days less, some days not at all. So probably 10 to 12 hours over this last week to get to this state. Yeah, there's still a few bugs, like you just saw the bunny speed up. That's because it's linked to the frame rate, and every now and again the frame rate will drop down to 400, and I have no idea why. I've tried. I spent 5 minutes trying to look through the profiling tools in Visual Studio to see what was going on, but I didn't see anything that stood out. So that's something that I've got to get back around to. But I'm sure it's fine. I'll find a fix for it. I'll find what's causing it. I had some other issues which I'll talk about later with the rendering to texture, just because I didn't fully understand the pipeline, um, what needed to be stored, copied, and disposed of in the right order, which led to me having the viewport about 200 frames per second instead of 1600, which it is now. So yeah, that's not good, but I figured out how to fix it while I was doing some other things. So yeah, it's just how things work out sometimes. So I think we'll jump into the code and I'll talk you over kind of some of the ideas that I had behind the game engine when creating it and designing it. Okay, so here we are in Visual Studio. Um, everything that I've written is in C Sharp. Or I use bindings for BGFX and ImGUI, which are C++ libraries. So I can just write in this nice language that I love, C Sharp, and not have to worry about a lot of the things that come with C++. Obviously, it comes with a performance hit with bindings, and just being in a more managed environment with garbage collection and all sorts. So you've got to think about different things, but it's a lot nicer, I find, than having to deal with loads of different things. Like you can have memory leaks and stuff in C Sharp. Have to remember to dispose of everything correctly. In C++, that is, you have to remember to dispose. In C Sharp, you don't have to think about that stuff that much. I'm using C++ libraries under the hood though, right? So it's just binding. So I have there can be memory leaks. Like if I create an object that's created in the library, I have to remember to dispose of that. So maybe some people would say that's more confusing because you're mixing kind of your responsibilities between the two things. Um, it's not so bad. You notice very quickly when you have a big issue like that. So it's the small ones that might go unnoticed, which can be the big problem. So it's a double-edged sword, right? So one of the things I've used both Unity and Unreal Engine before. So Unity, I use mostly, almost for all my projects that I've ever done, apart from one, which was in Unreal Engine. I did computer games programming at university, and in our final year, we had to make a full-fledged game that was judged by some creative directors or art directors from big studios. The people who made Sea of Thieves were there. Team 17, the people who make Worms, kind of was a big player in it. Also, what was it? Playground? Someone Playground? They were sponsoring the whole event. So yeah, that was really good. We won an award for technical. What was it? Technical, not advancement, but achievement, technical achievement or something. Yeah. So anyway, I'll stop rambling. So yeah, one of the things that I didn't like about Unity is that you have to new up all your objects. I really like dependency injection because it deals with that for me. I don't have to worry about it. I'd just be like, this thing needs these things, and this thing needs another thing, and it deals with all that stuff for me, and I don't have to worry about it. Also really good for testing, which is another thing that really grind my gears with Unity. I've used libraries for Unity that help with testing and with dependency injection. The name escapes me at the minute, but they're pretty good. But I just decided that I wanted to make my own engine for fun and see if I can solve these problems. So I have basic dependency injection. I'm just using Microsoft extension dependency injection and invoking it in a very way that I'd probably be frowned upon, but it's fine because it's early days and I don't have to really worry about that until somebody who cares looks at the code. So I have dependency injection starting out. I mostly target OpenGL backend just because I'm more familiar with the shader code than most other backends. DirectX 11, I've used DirectX a little bit, but I just test on OpenGL for now. I'm not 100% convinced it actually runs on DirectX just because I haven't updated any shaders for it. So yeah, it probably won't run. But anyway, that's also something else for the future. Okay, so the main thing that gets run is this editor renderer. So this is the thing that submits all the ImGUI windows. They all have their place in editor windows. So all of these do their own thing. This is just test code to see if I could make it start up nicely, but I didn't get around to using it. So this is just uses the console, writes all the console logs to it. Yeah, the properties window is where all that kind of create that entity. It comes over to here. I display this thing. All this is hard coded just because I was figuring out how to use it. Like it doesn't actually change the position of the entity that you've selected. Mainly because you can't type into the boxes because the input doesn't work. But yeah, even if you could, it wouldn't change anything just because I was figuring out how to use it. And I ran out of time. That was on Sunday evening, so that's where I got to with that. But yeah, so you go through here just for FPS counter. Let's see, what do you do? Rect, create the window. Oh yeah, and then all the viewport stuff is in here. This uses scene to texture renderer, which in here, this is where I write to the frame buffer with BGFX. Awful view IDs that are hard coded in here. Probably need parameterizing to make sure the view isn't being used. But yeah, so I had a problem in here where I was clearing the view rect every loop, which was actually attached to my frame buffer. So it meant that I had to create my textures every frame, and that was dropping my frame rate to about 200, 250 frames a second because I was creating a new frame buffer and a new texture. I actually had a memory leak here at one point where I forgot to dispose of the textures after creating them, and my VRAM usage jumped to about 7 gigs in about 10 seconds, so that's not great. But yeah, so I figured out I was just clearing it every time I went to blit it. But yeah, I figured out that, and now it runs like a dream almost, apart from that little problem with the 400 FPS. But yeah, so that's how that works. Oh, there was something else that I was doing in here wrong. What was it? Oh, I can't remember now. Oh yeah, I'd only made one texture. I didn't make a depth texture. So I only made a color texture, and if you're not familiar, without a depth texture to tell you how far a vertice is from the camera compared to another face, a face to a face, you'll get faces that are behind another one rendering on top, so you can essentially kind of see through the model in a very weird way. That was annoying, and it probably took me an hour too long to figure out why it wasn't working, and then I realized that I hadn't given it a depth texture. So that was a lesson learned that I'll never do again. For the I'm GUI stuff, I'm using imGUI.net, and there was this guy who submitted a pull request, Marco, yeah, Marocco on GitHub, and he submitted a pull request to this library. Thankfully, they didn't close it; otherwise, I'd probably never have seen it. And I literally just took his implementation from his pull request, which was great. I'll probably clean this up later. I haven't done anything. I've added the input for the mouse on imGUI, but this is why the keyboard doesn't work, because I haven't done anything with that. So yeah, so thanks to him, because that was a life save. Otherwise, I would have had to read all through the original documentation and learn how to do it myself, which nobody wants to do that really. So yeah, what else? I think that's it for now. Oh yeah, there was one other problem that I faced, which took me a long time actually, probably at least 3 hours to figure out what I'd done wrong here. So essentially, this is the code that I wrote for model loading. I'm using Asimp. It just loads it's a very popular model loading library. But yeah, so I was loading the model and submitting it, but all the faces were all messed up, and I couldn't figure out what was going wrong. Anyway, it turns out the problem was I had my index buffer as uints, and or just ints. I can't remember uints or ints. But that was the problem. They were uints or ints, which were 32-bit structures, right? So they needed to be shorts, because essentially what was happening was it was looking in it was dividing up the memory into however many bytes and then looking at it. But because each integer in my index buffer was taking up more bytes than it thought it was taking up, it was obviously rolling into the next one and reading half of the first index as the second index, and then it would look at the second index as the third index, and then the second half of the second index is the fourth index. So all of the indices were wrong, and it was drawing the vertices in the wrong order. Probably a lot of vertex 0, right? Because most of them wouldn't even fill up the integer. So yeah, that was awful. An awful experience, because I stayed up late to try and fix it, and didn't fix it in the end. Lost probably an hour of sleep, and then when I came back the next day, um, realized in the first maybe 20 minutes of trying to fix it again. So yeah, that's just another reminder of how C# environment is different to C++. Like you really have to work, because we're writing to the GPU, and it's really byte specific. Like everything has to be exactly in the right place, otherwise it's not going to render correctly. And one byte out of place can make your whole thing just not work at all. So yeah, that was an interesting life lesson that I probably will never, I hopefully never make that mistake again. So yeah, there's that. All right, so I hope some of you found this interesting. Yeah, I didn't video any of myself coding the engine. I know a lot. I watch a lot of game game devlogs or whatever myself. So a lot of people do that. Like, oh, this is what I did in the evening when I wasn't, with my friends showing off. Here's what I did. Yeah, I didn't do any of that. I did this. So yeah, but I didn't film any of that. So maybe if I'm gonna make another one, I'll video some of the code being wrote and maybe some live commentary on some of the problems that I'm facing, just to get maybe an idea into the mindset that I'm in when I'm in a rut, and how to solve them. So yeah, hopefully the next week will be just as productive as the first week. There's a lot of things that I want to get in. It feels like I want to do everything at once, but yeah, no, I don't want to fall into the same trap that I was in at the start. So yeah, we'll try and get the next stuff going, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.